Beloved soul, this message is not crossing your path by accident, and it is not arriving as a random bundle of comforting words tossed into the wind. It is arriving with timing that feels gentle on the surface, but carries the weight of heaven behind it, as though God has allowed this very moment to open because your heart is finally strong enough to receive what your spirit has been sensing for so long. There are seasons when loneliness becomes so familiar that it almost starts to feel like part of your identity. Seasons when prayers are whispered more than spoken, when tears fall where no one can see them, when you keep showing up with faith even though nothing around you seems to change. And yet even there, especially there, God has been present. He has not turned away from your waiting. He has not confused your silence for weakness. He has not mistaken your endurance for emptiness. He has been reading every hidden ache, counting every private surrender, and preparing something far more meaningful than a passing comfort. He is preparing a connection marked by purpose, a love shaped by faith, and a visible reminder that His care for you was never absent, only unfolding beyond your sight. So before we go deeper, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your heart in the comments with the words, "I trust God's timing." Not as a ritual, but as a quiet act of agreement with what heaven is doing. Because this message is for the one who felt delayed, misunderstood, and almost forgotten, yet is now standing closer than ever to a promise that will not only heal the heart, but reveal that God was writing a beautiful answer long before you knew how to ask for it. And as this divine promise begins drawing near, you must first understand that the waiting season was never empty, even when it felt unbearably quiet, because what looked like stillness to you was never stillness to God. There are pains that do not announce themselves loudly. They settle into the corners of daily life. They live in the moments when you smile for others while carrying your own disappointment in silence. When you celebrate someone else's answered prayer while wondering why your own story seems delayed. When you lie awake asking God whether you were overlooked, or whether something about you made love, peace, or recognition arrive for others more easily. The pain of waiting is not only about absence, it is about the questions absence creates. It is about rejection that makes you examine your worth, unanswered prayers that tempt you to doubt your voice, and hidden tears that fall because you are too strong to collapse publicly, but too human not to ache privately. Yet this is where spiritual maturity begins to deepen, because God often does His finest shaping in the places where human applause cannot reach. He saw every moment you were disappointed and kept your heart open anyway. He saw the nights when you tried to pray with confidence, but ended up speaking to Him through exhaustion. He saw the times you almost believed that the silence meant no, when in truth it meant not yet. Not because He delighted in prolonging your pain, but because He was protecting the timing of something too meaningful to be rushed. Delay has a bitter taste when you only measure it from the ground, but from heaven it often carries the fragrance of preparation. What you called slowness, God called forming. What you thought was neglect, God knew was refinement. Because some blessings cannot enter a life that has not yet been deepened enough to carry them wisely. If love had arrived in one of your earlier seasons, perhaps you would have received it with desperation instead of discernment. Perhaps you would have mistaken attention for alignment, chemistry for covenant, or emotional relief for true peace. But in the waiting, God was teaching your heart the language of substance. He was training you to notice what is steady rather than what is flashy, what is sincere rather than what is merely intense, what is holy rather than what is simply exciting. He was growing patience in you, not the weak kind that sits still because it has given up, but the sacred kind that remains open without becoming reckless. He was growing wisdom in you, the kind that comes not from books alone, but from surviving what almost broke you, and still choosing softness over bitterness. He was growing humility in you, teaching you how to be honest about your longing, without making your longing an idol. He was growing spiritual strength in you, which is often quieter than people imagine. Spiritual strength is not always thunder. Sometimes it is choosing to trust God one more day without visible evidence, one more prayer without immediate change, one more surrender without understanding the full picture. And that is what heaven was responding to all along. The earth may have looked silent, but heaven was not inactive. While you were grieving what had not happened yet, God was arranging what needed to happen first. He was closing doors that would have looked appealing but ended in confusion. He was exposing hidden motives in people you once thought were safe. He was pulling you away from environments that would have fed your loneliness instead of healing it. He was teaching your spirit to recognize peace, so that when the real thing came, you would not dismiss it for being calmer than your past chaos. This is why your waiting must never be interpreted as abandonment. It was not a wasted corridor between better chapters. It was one of the holiest classrooms of your life. In that season, you learned how to endure without losing tenderness. You learned how to carry disappointment without making it your identity. You learned how to belong to God, even when visible proof seemed delayed. And what was being built in you during that time was not small. It was the capacity to receive without self-sabotage, to love without fear controlling every reaction, and to recognize that what comes from God rarely arrives in fragments of panic. It comes with clarity, with weight, with peace. So if you have been asking whether those lonely years meant anything, let this settle into your spirit. None of it was empty. None of it was unseen. None of it was ignored. Every sigh, every question, every moment you chose faith while feeling fragile was gathered into something larger than you realized. Because heaven was not merely watching your pain, heaven was using it to prepare the kind of heart that could carry a real promise with maturity, gratitude, and discernment. And once you begin to see that the waiting season was full of hidden purpose, you become ready to understand another truth that often surprises the human mind, which is that God prepares love beyond human expectations and far outside the shallow measurements people use to judge what belongs together. Human beings love categories because categories create the illusion of control. People look at age, appearance, status, timing, background, and outward symmetry and decide what kind of love makes sense, what kind of connection seems respectable, what kind of pairing appears logical from the outside. But God has never been limited by the narrow furniture of human assumption. He does not build relationships according to gossip, trends, or surface compatibility alone. He sees spirit before appearance, sincerity before performance, devotion before polish, and purpose before public opinion. That is why divine connection often confuses observers before it comforts the people living inside it. What God joins together carries a wisdom that cannot always be understood at first glance, because it is not built on outward sameness. It is built on inward harmony. And this is where many people miss the mystery of what God is doing in your life. They imagine that fulfillment should arrive according to familiar patterns. They assume that the person meant for you must fit a script others can immediately approve of. But God is not trying to impress human expectation. He is trying to fulfill divine intention. The love being prepared for you is not fragile because it may surprise people. It is strong because it was chosen from a deeper place than appearance or custom. The younger soulmate in this story is not being revealed as a novelty, nor as a dramatic twist designed to create attention. This person carries something fresh that your soul will recognize before your mind has fully explained it. There is a liveliness in their spirit, a clear hopefulness that has not been fully hardened by cynicism, a sincerity that does not play games with affection, and a faith that glows not through performance, but through genuine trust in God. They may carry youth in one visible sense, but what will matter more is the purity of their heart, the softness of their presence, and the honest strength of their devotion. Some people assume maturity only moves in one direction, as though age alone creates wisdom. But life has shown again and again that some older hearts remain restless and shallow, while some younger hearts carry reverence, steadiness, and extraordinary depth. God knows this. He sees beyond the shell and directly into the core. He is not confused by what others misread, and because of that, what He prepares for you may rise above worldly logic without ever violating spiritual peace. The difference between you will not be a weakness, because divine love is not weakened by contrast when the contrast itself serves balance. Where one heart has learned through long endurance, the other may carry refreshing hope. Where one person has been shaped by deep waiting, the other may bring a lightness that feels like morning after years of dusk. Where one has gathered wisdom through trials, the other may offer sincerity untouched by unnecessary complication. This is not imbalance, this is complement. God often writes harmony through differences that would confuse a purely superficial mind. He knows how to bring two people together so that neither one diminishes the other, but both reveal hidden strengths in each other. And that is why you must resist the temptation to measure divine love with human rulers. Outward standards are notoriously poor at predicting inward peace. The world sees spectacle and calls it destiny. God sees alignment and calls it covenant. The world sees what looks impressive from a distance. God sees what will remain kind in private, faithful in confusion, patient in difficulty, and humble in blessing. So when this connection begins to unfold, you may notice that it does not fit every expectation you once imagined. But what it will carry is something more valuable than social approval. It will carry rest. It will carry recognition. It will carry that rare sense that your spirit is no longer struggling to translate what your heart is receiving. And that is how you will know this is not merely emotional excitement dressed in spiritual language. It will not demand that you betray your peace in order to keep it. It will not ask you to shrink your discernment in order to enjoy it. It will not build itself on confusion and then ask you to call that confusion mystery. No, this connection will be rooted in a harmony of heart and shared devotion to God. And that harmony will matter more than every outward label people use to make themselves feel wise. This is why God's design for love so often humbles human logic. He does not consult the trends of the age before writing a holy answer. He consults purpose. He consults character. He consults timing. He consults the private formation of two souls who have been prepared in ways the world never bothered to see. So do not fear if what God is doing stretches your old assumptions. Sometimes the very sign that heaven is involved is that the blessing arrives with a shape your former imagination would not have designed, yet your spirit recognizes it with unmistakable peace. And when you realize that God's design for love is formed beyond human expectation, it becomes easier to see how two lives can be quietly prepared in separate places for a meeting that appears sudden on earth, but has been unfolding in heaven for a very long time. One of the deepest mysteries of divine timing is that God can work on two people at once without either one fully understanding that their paths are being bent toward each other. While you were learning endurance in one place, another heart was being taught sincerity somewhere else. While you were being stripped of illusions through disappointment, another person was being shaped through their own hidden lessons, perhaps in ways no one around them fully recognized. This is how God often moves. He does not always announce preparation with signs loud enough for the public to notice. Much of his work happens in secret, where character is formed before connection is revealed. And that secrecy is mercy, because if people saw the unfinished stages of what God was building, they might misjudge the process and walk away too soon. The chosen one and the person being prepared for them have not been living meaningless, separate stories. Their journeys have been spiritually linked long before their eyes ever meet. Not linked through fantasy, not through unhealthy obsession, but through divine orchestration. Each has been learning lessons that make future recognition possible. Faith has not been growing in identical ways, but in complementary ways. Humility has been taught through different circumstances. Kindness has been tested in different fires. Endurance has taken different shapes. One may have endured through a long season of being misunderstood, learning how to stay true while carrying deep emotional weight in silence. The other may have endured through battles that taught openness, resilience, or the courage to remain soft in a hard world. One may have learned how to stop chasing false reassurance. The other may have learned how to stop fearing real vulnerability. One may have been taught patience through delay. The other may have been taught trust through surrender. Yet all of it has been preparation, because true connection is stronger when it is not used to replace inner growth, but to meet two people who have already begun becoming whole before they arrive in each other's presence. This is why rushed relationships often collapse under the weight of needs they were never meant to carry. People meet too early, and expect one another to heal what only God and personal growth can heal. They demand answers from connection that should have been developed in solitude. But when God prepares two people separately, He protects the future by strengthening the individuals first. He teaches each heart how to stand before teaching them how to join. He deepens identity before unveiling union. He cultivates discernment before opening the door to companionship. So when the meeting comes, it does not feel like two empty people grasping for rescue. It feels like two prepared spirits recognizing a familiar peace they did not manufacture themselves. There is immense beauty in that kind of meeting, because it is not built on panic, it is built on readiness, and readiness is one of heaven's quiet signatures. The future meeting between you and the one God is preparing will not be an accident that luck happened to arrange. It will be the visible point of a long invisible line. Every closed door, every delay, every internal shift, every lesson in trust, every moment of choosing faith over despair has been bending the story toward that encounter. Even the disappointments were not random when viewed through this lens. They were part of the refinement that taught you what peace sounds like, what sincerity feels like, and what kind of presence carries life instead of confusion. In the same way, the other person has also been guided, corrected, protected, and formed. God has been shaping both hearts individually so that recognition can happen at the right time, not merely as attraction, but as spiritual clarity. And clarity matters, because real love is not just about feeling drawn. It is about being able to recognize what is healthy, what is genuine, and what is aligned with God's heart. You are not being led toward a connection held together by fantasy alone. You are being led toward a meeting that has roots. Roots in prayer, roots in formation, roots in things heaven has been tending long before either of you understood the full picture. That is why you must honor the separate seasons as much as the future union. Those solitary chapters were not filler episodes in your life. They were sacred ground. In them, God was not delaying the story. He was writing the deeper parts of it. He was teaching you what to value, what to release, what to recognize, and what to no longer tolerate. He was ensuring that when the right person appeared, you would not overlook them because they came with peace instead of chaos. And he was ensuring that the person coming toward you would also be able to recognize your heart, not just your image, your depth, not just your presence, your calling, not just your charm. So if the path has felt long, let that not discourage you. Long preparation often precedes meaningful encounters. What takes time in God's hands is not forgotten, it is fortified. And when two lives that have been separately shaped by faith, humility, kindness, and endurance finally move toward one another, the meeting carries a quiet gravity. It feels less like something invented in the moment and more like something remembered by the Spirit, as though heaven is gently revealing what it has been arranging all along. And as these two lives draw closer, under a timing that heaven has been protecting with extraordinary care, the meeting itself will feel peaceful, natural, and Spirit-led in a way that may surprise you, precisely because it will not arrive wrapped in noise. Many people have been taught to expect that what is destined must be dramatic, that what is real must strike like lightning, that what is meant for them must enter with chaos, obsession, or overwhelming emotional force. But God often works with a gentleness that the wounded heart can almost miss at first, because it has become too familiar with turbulence. What He sends does not always shout. Sometimes it settles. Sometimes it arrives like sunrise after a cold and restless night, not forcing the day to begin with violence, but slowly filling the horizon with warmth until the whole landscape is changed. That is the kind of recognition this meeting will carry. It will not feel like performing, chasing, proving, or decoding mixed signals. It will feel like exhaling after holding your breath for much too long. There will be something quietly familiar in the connection, not because you have known this person in the ordinary sense, but because your spirit will recognize the peace resting on their presence. Safety will speak before words fully do. Ease will begin to replace self-protection. Conversation will not feel like a test you must pass or a puzzle you must solve. It will flow with the rare grace that appears when two people are not trying to manipulate an impression, but are simply present in truth. You will notice the naturalness of the laughter, how it rises without effort rather than being forced to cover discomfort. You will notice the tenderness of being listened to without interruption, interpreted without distortion, and received without suspicion. There is a kind of emotional safety that cannot be faked for long, and this connection will carry it. You will not leave interactions feeling drained, confused, or smaller. You will leave feeling steadier, clearer, and strangely comforted, as though something in you that had been braced for disappointment is beginning to loosen under the realization that peace can indeed be mutual. Mutual respect will become one of the clearest signs that this bond is not built from fantasy. Respect is holy because it honors the image of God in another person. It does not rush vulnerability, it does not exploit tenderness, it does not turn affection into control, and it does not mistake possession for closeness. In this connection, care will not come wrapped in instability. It will not ask you to sacrifice your discernment in order to call it passion. It will not generate confusion and then demand that you rename confusion as depth. No, the presence of God resting within the relationship will produce a steadiness that protects rather than unsettles. Even the silences between you will not feel empty or threatening. They will feel breathable. And that matters, because one of the hidden tests of a connection is whether silence creates fear or peace. When God is present, even quiet moments carry life. You will begin to understand that what is spirit-led does not need to be forced into existence through fear-driven effort. It has an organic quality, like water finding its level, like morning light entering a room through an open window. That is why this meeting will not have the flavor of instability. The bond will not be built on frantic highs followed by cold distance. It will not throw your spirit into confusion and call that chemistry. Instead, it will carry the sober sweetness of something that belongs. And once you taste that kind of peace, you will see more clearly than ever why so many former attachments had to fall away. Because they demanded labor where God intended rest, anxiety where God intended trust, and performance where God intended honest presence. Then, as that peaceful meeting grows into a living connection, you will discover that this bond is not arriving merely to please the heart for a moment, but to bring healing and renewal to places within you that have been quietly carrying old disappointment for far too long. Real love does not erase history as though pain never existed. It does something wiser and kinder. It meets the wounded places without humiliating them. It does not mock the scars for being visible. It does not grow impatient with the parts of you that learned caution through loss. Instead, it creates the conditions in which healing becomes possible. This younger soulmate will not arrive to pretend your past was nothing. They will not step into your life as a magician removing every ache with a single gesture, but through sincerity, consistency, and emotional honesty, they will begin helping restore what disappointment tried to steal. Joy will return not as a performance, but as a response to finally being met with gentleness. Confidence will begin to rise again, not because you suddenly become perfect, but because you are no longer constantly relating to someone who activates insecurity as a form of power. Hope will start breathing again, not as a fragile wish, but as something strengthened by daily evidence that sincere love still exists in the world and can indeed touch your life. This is one of the most beautiful ways God heals. He often sends restoration in relational form, not because another human being becomes your savior, but because kindness embodied can help retrain a heart that had grown used to guarding itself. The relationship will become a safe place, and safe places are sacred. In a safe place, you do not have to edit your tenderness to avoid punishment. You do not have to brace for mockery when you speak honestly. You do not have to translate your pain into something more convenient for another person to handle. You are seen, respected, and understood with increasing depth, and that understanding itself begins lifting burdens that once felt welded to your inner life. The emotional weight you carried from rejection, delay, misreading, or betrayal will not vanish overnight, but it will grow lighter because you will no longer be carrying it alone or in secret. Encouragement will become natural within this bond. Words will not be used carelessly. Support will not arrive only when it is easy. And the great miracle here will be its ordinariness. Healing will happen in simple conversations, in patient responses, in thoughtful attention, in the calm rhythm of being treated with dignity, again and again, until your nervous system begins to believe what your spirit has long hoped. That love can be honest without being harsh, steady without being dull, intimate without becoming destructive. This blessing will feel deeply meaningful in everyday life because God often hides the greatest treasures inside ordinary moments. You may find restoration in a quiet meal shared without tension, in a walk where no one is trying to win, in a prayer spoken softly together, in the relief of realizing you no longer have to anticipate emotional storms around every corner. Such moments may seem small to the outside world, but they are not small to the soul that has known drought. To the heart that has endured emotional famine, sincere consistency feels like rain on dry ground. And over time, that rain changes everything. The hardened places soften, the fearful places rest. The parts of you that once expected disappointment begin to make room for trust. This is renewal, not as spectacle, but as daily resurrection. And as healing deepens and joy begins to breathe more freely in both of your lives, another beautiful truth will become visible. There is a balance between wisdom and freshness in this union that is not accidental, but carefully formed by God to enrich both of you. One of the great mistakes people make when thinking about relationships is assuming that difference automatically creates imbalance. But difference, when governed by humility and mutual honor, can create a remarkable wholeness. You carry maturity, depth, calm strength, and spiritual wisdom shaped by seasons that were not easy. You have learned to endure, to perceive, to reflect, to hold steady when circumstances tried to shake your foundation. There is value in that. There is protection in that. There is a kind of beauty that only time and surrender can produce. And the younger soulmate will bring a freshness that does not compete with your depth, but breathes life into it. Their hopeful energy, warmth, and renewed joy will not diminish your seriousness. They will lighten what has become too heavy without making it shallow. They will remind you that wisdom is not only meant to guard life, but also to enjoy it. In turn, your steadiness will not suppress their light. It will give it structure, direction, and safety. Your calm strength will offer reassurance. Your spiritual insight will create shelter. Your experience will not be used to dominate, but to guide with tenderness. This is how healthy complement works. One brings stability and groundedness. The other brings uplift and brightness. One brings seasoned discernment. The other brings refreshing openness. One knows how to stand through storms. The other knows how to bring song back after the rain. Neither role is superior. Both are gifts. And because these gifts are honored rather than weaponized, the relationship will not become a battleground of ego. It will become a place where both souls are enlarged. You will enrich each other instead of competing for control. You will strengthen each other instead of exposing each other's weakness for advantage. This matters because too many people have only known relationships where differences became fault lines. But when God builds a union, differences can become architecture. They can become the very beams that hold the home together. Your maturity will create steadiness when quick emotions threaten to run ahead. Their warmth will create movement when old caution tempts everything to stay locked down. Your depth will protect the bond from becoming superficial. Their freshness will protect it from becoming overly burdened. Together, there will be a companionship that feels living, balanced, and deeply human in the best sense. Both of you will be valued, uplifted, and strengthened precisely because neither of you must shrink for the other to shine. And that is one of the clearest marks of a union blessed by heaven. It does not demand diminishment as the price of closeness. It calls forth the best in both people and gives those strengths a place to serve love. Then, as this balanced and healing companionship becomes visible over time, you will understand more clearly what it means that God's public embrace will be seen through quiet joy, because the public sign of His faithfulness will not arrive as spectacle, applause, or dramatic recognition from the crowd. Many imagine that when God vindicates a season of waiting, it must happen through something loud enough to silence every critic in a single moment. But God's ways are often more refined than human revenge fantasies. His public embrace is often visible not because everyone suddenly praises you, but because peace becomes so evident in your life that even those who once misread your story can no longer deny that something beautiful has taken root. Others will notice the sincerity between you. They will notice the gentleness, the affection, the natural harmony, the way your presence together does not seem strained or theatrical. They will see that this is not a connection manufactured to prove a point. It is a life-giving bond that carries the fragrance of truth. And that quiet joy will say more than arguments ever could. People who expected loneliness to define your future will witness tenderness. People who once misunderstood your delay as failure will quietly observe the wisdom of God's timing. Those who doubted whether patient hearts are ever truly seen by heaven will have before them a living testimony that they are. This is why the relationship itself becomes part of the message. It does not merely exist for your private happiness, though your happiness matters to God. It also becomes a witness to His character. It says that delay is not always denial. It says that faithful hearts are not forgotten. It says that what God prepares in secret can bloom in plain sight without losing its holiness. And perhaps most striking of all, the visible peace resting on this bond will not feel boastful. It will feel settled. That settledness is what will move people. Not because you are performing perfection, but because sincerity has a radiance of its own. When two people care for each other with honesty and reverence, others can sense the difference. They may not always have language for it, but they feel it. They feel the absence of games. They feel the safety. They feel the order. They see the joy that does not need to shout because it knows where it came from. In that way, God's public embrace becomes visible through the most beautiful kind of evidence, a life that quietly testifies. And for some who watch from a distance, your story may become permission to hope again. It may teach them that divine love is not a fantasy reserved for others. It may encourage them to stop rushing counterfeit answers out of fear. It may help them trust that patient waiting, though painful, is not pointless when placed in God's hands. So even your visible peace will become an instrument of blessing beyond yourselves. And from there, as this testimony of quiet joy continues unfolding, love guided by faith will begin shaping a shared future that is not only romantic in feeling, but rich in purpose, tenderness, and steady companionship. This is where the beauty deepens, because a relationship anchored in God does not end at emotional fulfillment. It matures into a life built together with intention. Shared faith will become one of the deepest roots of your future, not merely as language you both know, but as a lived rhythm that keeps recentering the bond. You will support each other in prayer, in discernment, in difficult decisions, in gratitude, and in ordinary days that require patience more than excitement. Mutual support will not only appear in crises, it will be woven into the fabric of daily life. And daily life is where true love proves itself. It is easy for many people to imagine grand moments, but heaven-honoring love shines most clearly in the ordinary, in conversations at the end of long days, in walks where burdens are gently named, in meals shared with thankfulness, in small acts of care that would never go viral but mean everything to the one receiving them, in quiet evenings where presence itself becomes a comfort, in prayers whispered when words are few, in choosing understanding over pride, in forgiving quickly, in rejoicing sincerely, in carrying one another with humility through seasons of change. These are not minor details. This is the substance of a shared future. Both of you will continue growing in love, purpose, and spiritual maturity, precisely because the relationship will not be treated as a finish line, but as a living garden that must be tended with gratitude. God's kindness will be reflected in the order of this union. There will be room for affection and also room for reverence. There will be joy and also responsibility. There will be delight and also discipline. And that harmony matters, because love that honors heaven does not become less warm, it becomes more trustworthy. You will help each other become more fully yourselves in God, not less. Your conversations will sharpen purpose. Your patience with one another will deepen character. Your gratitude will protect the bond from entitlement. Your shared faith will keep teaching you both that love is not sustained by emotion alone, but by daily choices shaped by truth. The future being prepared here is hopeful and stable, not because it will never face difficulty, but because it will be rooted in something stronger than passing feeling. It will be rooted in companionship that knows how to endure, how to listen, how to pray, how to celebrate, and how to remain soft-hearted under pressure. That is why this is not merely a romance. It is a union that reflects God's order, a companionship that honors heaven by the way it treats what heaven has entrusted. And when you look ahead, you will not see a fantasy built from idealized moments alone. You will see a life that feels inhabitable, warm and real. A life where love is not just declared, but practiced. A life where the presence of God keeps turning ordinary time into holy ground. And this is why the final reassurance matters so much. The waiting was not wasted. Not one hidden prayer, not one delayed season, not one tear that fell where no one else could see was meaningless. God has been writing a beautiful chapter all along, even in the stretches where nothing seemed to move and hope felt thin in your hands. What appeared empty was being filled beneath the surface. What felt silent was being shaped in secret. And when this connection arrives with peace, healing, and quiet certainty, you will understand with a depth that words can barely hold that heaven was never absent from your story. Meaningful love stories are still being prepared by God for faithful hearts. They are still being written for those who kept believing through confusion, those who kept praying through delay, those who remained tender without letting the world turn them cold. So let this settle deeply into you now. What once looked like the end of hope was never the end. It was the edge of a new beginning, the threshold of a gentler and deeper love, the opening of a chapter aligned not by panic or pressure, but by divine peace. And when that chapter fully opens, you will not merely say that love finally came. You will know that God, in His wisdom and kindness, brought you into something worth every season of becoming.